A class that is good is always good, right? Wrong! Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben you here for another Pathfinder 2E video. And this is a video that has been on the back of my mind for a little while, and I've been trying to put it into words, and I think I have it good enough to make this now. So let's talk about Power Curve in Pathfinder 2E today. Now, before I get into that, let me do my usual content check-in here. If you like the stuff that you're seeing on my channel and you want me to keep making it, please consider supporting me. You can do that for free by liking and subscribing to the channel. That helps out more than you know. And if you have a couple of bucks to throw my way, consider becoming a YouTube member to gain early access to all of my videos. If you're looking for a chance to meet me in person, consider checking out MythicCon Charlotte at the beginning of November. I'm going to be there doing Pathfinder 2E games. I've got 3 goals for you today. Number 1, I want to discuss this idea of a power curve. I want to spend most of the video doing practical examples of what that means for character building and thinking about your character. And then I want to conclude by talking about modern design in Pathfinder as well as Starfinder as it relates to Power Curve, because I think modern character design is quite different from older character design in this system. All right, so let's start with this concept. And I just drew a squiggle on the screen that doesn't really represent anything in particular, but it'll give you an idea of what I mean. I want you to imagine that the average Pathfinder character is this strong, like right down the middle of this, squiggly line, okay? And at sometimes, your character might be above average. And at other times, your character might be below average. And yet, at each level up, your power might oscillate, might change a little bit relative to the average Pathfinder character. Because I don't think most characters in the system are just consistently, I am incredibly good all the time at every level. I think there's a lot of dipping and diving and peaking, and I want to try to put this into some terms that might be useful today. And this is what I'm going to call a power curve. How powerful is your character relative to another character at the same level? And for the purposes of this video, we're going to view all members of a class as the exact same power level. That's not true. Like, clearly your build is going to make things different. But today we're going to talk about, like, barbarians as far as their power curve is concerned, as if all barbarians are the same, for the purpose of just kind of keeping terminology consistent throughout the video. So your power can be rated as relative to the power of other classes, especially other similar classes, I think. So at any given time, you can look at a fighter, a barbarian, an exemplar, an investigator, a rogue, and kind of compare how you think they are at any given level. And sometimes some of these classes might be better than others, and we might call them ahead of curve. Maybe they get a feature earlier than everyone else. Maybe they have something that other people do not have until a higher level. This is being ahead of curve. Whereas if you feel weaker at a certain level, then you are behind the curve. So someone who is up here or up here might be ahead of the curve at that time, whereas someone who is down here or even down here might be below the normal expected power level at that time. Now, notably, Pathfinder 2E is a pretty darn good system in terms of balance. So even if you are one of the less powerful classes at any given level, your character is still fully viable. And that's a great thing. Now, at some levels, you are going to get a noticeable increase in power, and you are going to go up on that power curve at that chart. I mean, unless everybody else is going up at that same rate at that same time. So, for example, at 5th level, many martial characters are going to become an expert in their weapon of choice. And if everybody is getting that bump, well, then that's not really a bump to anyone, right? At least not the people that you are comparing yourself to. So, in actuality, many of the places where you are really going to jump up is when you hit your build defining feats. And again, we're going to try to treat all members of a class as the same for the purpose of terminology within this video. So maybe every fighter wants slam down. Maybe every barbarian wants attack of opportunity. More on that a little bit later. But when you get some of these critical feats, you are going to get a spike in power. And if a whole bunch of other classes are getting a spike in power at a certain level and you aren't, well, that's where you start to fall behind. So for example, kineticists get to add a +1 or later a +2 or even more from gate attenuators. Well, that's what they have instead of their like potency and striking runes. But the martial characters can get their +2 to accuracy before the kineticists can get it. And those martial characters are going to get their weapon upgrades about a level before the kineticist is going to get their gate attenuator upgrade. And that means that the kineticist is going to have 1 accuracy less than a lot of those other classes. And at least by that metric, they are going to fall behind on that power curve. And as we can see here, the power curve might not be fully just related to your class. It may be tied to items that you are capable of using as well. And to use another level 5 breakpoint, level 5 is when you get your first set of stat increases after you initially select your stats and attributes at level 1. Well, for a lot of those classes that are down 1 on accuracy, because strength or dexterity isn't their primary stat, and this is going to be things like thaumaturges, for example, that have charisma as a core stat, or investigators that have intelligence as a core stat, well, they can go and catch up at this time. I think there are some general tendencies that you can say about power curve without getting crazy about analysis. Number 1, strength martials tend to come out of the gate very, very strong. At early levels, when you can just add your +4 strength modifier to your damage rolls, that is going to make a very, very big difference in terms of power early on. Once you start getting to more damage dice and that strength modifier starts mattering less and less, that initial boost isn't necessarily going to keep holding true. And casters tend to start out as relatively weak as a whole. They tend to have less HP, worse defenses, and their damage output is not going to match martials, especially in the early game. And then those casters are later going to start getting access to game-breaking spells, your things like synesthesia, your incapacitation trait spells that can just, for 2 actions, completely take an enemy out of combat, and incredible buff, debuff, and healing spells. And they're going to just gradually get a little stronger every time they gain access to a new rank of spells. For many martial classes at level 6, they're going to get a big power boost when they gain Attack of Opportunity, which has the potential to double their damage output. Are you really going to take an Attack of Opportunity every single turn so that that's true? No, absolutely not, but it is a very noticeable increase. And if you are a class that has a mechanic tied to a major skill proficiency check, think things like inventors for their overdrive or maybe swashbucklers for panache, they're going to get major breakpoints when you get to increase your skill abilities to expert, master, or legendary proficiency for the first time. And at this point, rather than remain fully in theory for a lot of this video, I think it is more useful to just get into something like Path Builder and look at what feats you're picking up at any given level and how you might feel relative to other classes. And this is very much a feel YouTube video rather than a numbers analysis version. You can sit there and number crunch, okay, here is my expected damage output for a Thaumaturge Barbarian fighter at every single level, And you can make some useful data that way, but I think as you're going to see, you don't always need to do that to tell whether or not you're getting the short end of the stick at any given level up. Okay, and for the purposes of illustrating my point in this video, I'm going to pick two of the probably most well-known classes and simple classes, the Fighter and the Barbarian. So let's imagine that you are a level 1 Barbarian, and you have the Giant Instinct, meaning that you add quite a bit of flat damage to your attacks. You're not only adding your strength modifier, but you're also adding this nice chonky rage damage, meaning that you can often outright kill an enemy even on a regular hit, and on a critical hit, oh buddy, it's gone. Well, based on that feature, you are probably well ahead of the curve versus another strength marshal at this level. And you also get a level 1 class feat, which I think for the vast majority of barbarians is going to be sudden charge. So you have great damage and great mobility at level 1, as well as good HP, the ability to now, in post-remaster rules, enter rage without using an action, as long as you're not wearing heavy armor. There's a lot to like from the level 1 barbarian. So you level up, you hit level 2. Well, how are you feeling about your character at level 2? Honestly, probably a little less good than you did at level 1. I think the vast majority of barbarians are going to find that they have kind of underwhelming feats for level 2, and will probably end up with something like Intimidating Strike, so that they can have a 2-action activity that gives some support to their party. But if at level 1 you were looking like, yeah, I'm a barbarian, I'm the man, at level 2 you're like, I'm still pretty great and all, but, maybe at level 4 I'm going to be more excited for what I'm getting. And then we go ahead to level 4 and you start looking at your options. And there's some stuff here that's solid. Depending on the type of campaign you are in, Raging Athlete can be very good at some tables if things like climb speed and swim speed matter. And if they don't, okay, maybe that one's not for you. Well, there's Swipe, which is real good if your GM runs enemies that always stand exactly next to each other. Well, this is real cool sometimes, but how often is your swipe actually going to work? Oh, maybe it's not going to work until we get improved swipe later on. Or you take something like Wounded Rage, which maybe doesn't matter because you can automatically use Rage as a free action at the beginning of combat. So once again, at level 4, you maybe find your feat choice a little bit lacking. And while you started off as the absolute man, the king, the damage master at level 1, you're still just kind of riding off your level 1 power for quite some time. Let's say that you end up taking Swipe here. At level 5, you're going to pick up critical weapon specialization as well as expert proficiency in your weapon. That is pretty common here, nothing to write home about. And then things start to look real good in Barbarian land once again. At level 6, you actually have too many good options, believe it or not. Most Barbarians are just going to default to taking Reactive Strike. It is just objectively going to be a large damage increase on a lot of characters, and this is doubly so if you are using a reach weapon. For our Dragon Barbarian specifically, they're going to have a very tough choice, because at level 6 you can either get your really cool Dragon Instinct ability of being able to breathe fire or whatever it is your breath is going to be based on your tradition, or take that Reactive Strike. Either way, it is a big damage increase. If you take the Dragon's Rage Breath, you have the option of making an attack and then doing a saving throw activity, and that is a highly weaponized turn, or you just gain the generically powerful Reactive Strike action. Either way, you can't go wrong. You hit level 7, And you start to get a ton of good stuff at the same time. Level 7, the Giant Instinct Barbarian is eating good again. Their rage damage literally doubles, which is fantastic. They gain increased proficiency on fortitude saves, and you pick up weapon specialization for additional damage as well. They get 3 things at level 7, whereas previously we were kind of looking every other level a lot of times for what the Barbarian was going to be gaining. So, we looked good, and then we kind of were for a couple levels, and then we looked good, and then we looked good, and the same thing's going to be true at level 8 again. At level 8, you can gain access to a lot of safety by taking Renewed Vigor. Assuming that you are attacking each turn, well, you're going to get a number of temporary hit points equal to your level plus your Constitution modifier, which is probably maxed or close to it for this level. Or you can go back and take whichever one of the level 6 feats that you did not end up taking. Either way, you are relatively powerful at this specific level. So for our sample Barbarian here, we looked well ahead of the curve at level 1. We were fine at levels 2, 3, 4, maybe slightly below average at some places in there. At level 6, we start feeling really good. At level 7, we feel even better. At level 8, we feel really good. So there are clear levels where you are gaining more or less than the average class might be. And this is what I am talking about in terms of the power curve. At any point in here, is the Dragon Barbarian going to just be a bad class, a bad character? No, I don't think so. But it is going to be more impressive at some levels, and that is worth thinking about, I think. Because I want you to imagine that you are going to play this campaign that is going to end at level 5. Well, that's before the Giant Barbarian gets to start doing some of its really cool stuff and getting some of its biggest increases. You might be better off playing a different class if you want to get a lot of your really cool things and you want to feel above power curve for some levels. So now let's do this same thing, but with a fighter. Well, the fighter is starting with 2 more accuracy than everybody else, so they're already eating good in that capacity at level 1. Beyond that, they also get level 1 reactive strike, which a lot of people are waiting for level 6 to get. If they want it, they have shield block for free, and they also get a first level class feat, which probably means for most builds that you are taking one of Vicious Swing, Sudden Charge, or Double Slice, all incredibly iconic fighter feats. The fighter is great at level 1, it just gets so much. Well, then at level 2, you've got a couple of different really good feats, and you're probably picking up, let's say your build wants Vicious Swing and Sudden Charge, or wants Double Slice and Sudden Charge. Well, that's your level 1 and your level 2 feats. That sounds great at both of those levels. And you do get some stuff at level 3, but most fighter builds, I think, get a huge spike at level 4 when they pick up Slam Down. Slam Down is ridiculous, in my opinion. It is a 2-action activity that if you hit with it, you get to attempt to trip the opponent afterwards. And this is so incredibly strong, specifically within the context of a fighter, because you have reactive strike. So when they try to stand up after you knock them down, you get a guaranteed free swing on them. So you are taking your slam down attack at maximum accuracy, you're going to take your reactive strike at maximum accuracy, and since you have 2 more accuracy than everybody else, this is great. So level 1 looks great, level 2 looks great, level 4, holy moly, that is a huge damage output spike. This is great. Then at level 5, you become a weapon master while everyone else is becoming an expert, so this looks great for you too. However, when we start going a little bit further, you then might realize, hey, the Barbarian was getting sweet stuff at level 6. Well, what is the fighter getting at level 6? Now, at this point, you might have taken a lot of the feats from early on in the fighter tree that are good for you, so you might end up taking something like Furious Focus. And that's not to say that Furious Focus is bad or anything, but considering that many times you're going to move and then do a 2-action activity, this might not do a lot in some cases. Or you might end up taking something that is useful, but considerably more niche than what the Barbarian is taking. And I feel like that is kind of the case at this sort of mid-level point for the fighter, where there are things that can be very good here still, but the levels at which the fighter are peaking are different than the levels that the Barbarian is peaking in terms of when you get to pick up really, really cool abilities. So even though these two classes are occupying a very similar niche of, hey, I am going to hit people hard and consistently, at different levels, these classes are going to have different points on the power curve. And not every level up is created equal. And when you start comparing individual level ups from class to class, you're going to see that the breakpoints for power are not necessarily shared. Are they similar on many classes? Absolutely. Are they consistent across the board? No way. All right, now, this next part is purely speculation on my end. But I think that Paizo is now intentionally playing with power curves as a part of their design process. And I think this is a relatively new thing. And the first time that this was very, very apparent to me was with the Exemplar. The Exemplar is a class that gets so much level 1 power. They get 3 different icons at level 1, and each one of them has a relatively strong ability attached to it. And they get a ton of options for a level 1 character. They're going to have 3 different Transcendence abilities, each of which could be battle defining or even character defining. And the fact that they get all of this level 1 power is then balanced out by the fact that they don't really get good level 2 or 4 class feats. The numbers that are available on a lot of the alternative Transcendence activities are not particularly impressive. And you might just find yourself taking 2 extra versions of Energized Spark because none of the class feats really speak to you. And it's not until level 6 that they get another good feat with something like their Attack of Opportunity or Low of War that can let them become temporarily quickened. So while they might start off level 1 looking incredible, they are then going to kind of be below curve for a little while as their power budget catches up. And then when they are kind of back on track at level 6, now you start to get some good class feat options again. And honestly, I think this is very, very intentional design. It's okay to have a class be too strong at some levels if they are in turn too weak at other levels. And I think making this an active part of the design process is now a thing that they are doing. And their willingness to give classes more stuff at level 1 now, and then kind of be a little conservative with some of the class feats that they're going to pick up over the next couple of levels, lets them do cool things, like give the Animist some juiced focus spells, or give Starfinder examples, the Mystic an incredible single action healing option in Vitality Network, or the Witch Warper their Quantum Field. As long as you make it so that these classes aren't getting their crazy breakpoints until a little bit later on, it's okay to let them come out of the gates a little bit stronger. And I think many of the modern class designs, the Exemplar, the Animist, the Witch Warper, the Mystic, I think a lot of those have high power budget at level 1, and then they let them kind of have some mediocre class feats for a couple levels until they get their next breakpoint at maybe around level 6. And then on some other classes, you might see that they are instead striving for consistent output, where at just about every level, their class feats are significantly good. Like, there's just a good class feat to take at every level, which I don't think is the case on many older classes. Many of the spellcaster classes in particular, like Wizard and Sorcerer, have often very, very, very underwhelming class feats, and you might really struggle to find one that you like for your build. Whereas some of the modern classes just have rock solid feats at every level. They might not have a lot of options for them, but it's kind of built into their power budget. Hey, there might only be 4 options at this level, but a lot of them are going to be just good. So, as you are kind of gearing up to build your next character, I encourage you to think about how that character is going to look relative to other characters at various level breakpoints. I can tell you in my own game, my Witch Warper just leveled up from level 5 to level 6, and I got a class-defining ability at level 6 called Enlarge Quantum Field that is going to allow me to control a larger and larger and larger amount of the battlefield every turn, and I am very excited to start using it. And that class feat is the first class feat that is just like, hey, this is the one. And so far, I have really been relying on some level 1 class features to carry me this far. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I hope this was useful to you all. If you have any thoughts about this, feel free to throw it down in the comments below, and have a great rest of the day. See ya!